My name is Serena Vale, and for 7 years, I lived in a house that looked like success, but felt like control. From the outside, everything about my life was enviable. The house was modern, glass walls, marble floors, and a view that stretched across the city like we owned it. The cars were new. The dinners were expensive. The photos on social media were carefully curated. Smiling couple, elegant events, perfect lighting. People used words like power couple. They said I was lucky, and for a long time I believed them. I met Adrian Vale when I was 24. He was confident in a way that felt magnetic, not loud, but certain. The kind of man who walked into a room and didn't need attention because he assumed he already had it. I mistook that certainty for strength. He mistook my kindness for compliance. At first, it felt like stability. He planned everything, chose the restaurants, organized trips, handled finances. He said things like, "You don't have to worry about anything anymore." And after a chaotic childhood, that sounded like peace. What I didn't realize was this: when someone removes all your worries, they can also remove all your choices. The first shift was subtle. It always is. We were at a dinner with his colleagues when I interrupted him, just to add a small detail to a story he was telling. Nothing major, nothing disrespectful. But when we got home, he closed the door gently, turned to me and said, "Don't do that again." His tone wasn't angry. That would have been easier to recognize. It was calm, controlled. Disappointed. "You made me look weak," he added. I laughed at first. I thought he was joking. He was. After that, I started noticing patterns. If I disagreed with him in public, he would go quiet. Cold, distant. If I expressed an opinion that didn't match his, he would smile in that same calm way and say, "You're overthinking it." If I pushed further, he would end the conversation with one phrase. "Let it go, Serena." It sounded reasonable. Mature even, but over time, let it go became a wall I couldn't climb. The control didn't arrive all at once. It came in layers. He suggested I quit my job. "You don't need the stress," he said. "I can take care of us." At the time, I was working in marketing. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't passionate either, so I said yes. That was the first real mistake. Not because leaving my job was wrong, but because I didn't replace it with anything that was mine. Financial independence quietly disappeared. At first, it didn't feel like a loss. He gave me a card. Told me to use it for anything I needed. But anything I needed slowly became anything he approved. Large purchases required discussion. Small ones invited commentary. "Do you really need this? That's a bit excessive. You're not thinking long-term." It wasn't about money, it was about permission. Socially, things shifted too. My friends became less convenient. My family became too dramatic. He never forbade me from seeing them. He didn't need to. He just made it uncomfortable. If I went out without him, he'd text constantly. Not angry messages, just questions. "Where are you? Who are you with? When will you be home?" Each message looked harmless. Together, they felt like pressure. Eventually, I stopped going out as much. It was easier, quieter, safer. By year 3, I had become a version of myself I barely recognized. I spoke less. Laughed softer. Chose my words carefully. Not because I was afraid of him yelling, but because I was afraid of his silence. Silence was his sharpest weapon. He could go hours, sometimes days, without speaking to me. Not ignoring completely. Just reducing me. Short answers, no eye contact, no warmth. It made me feel like I had done something wrong, even when I didn't know what. And the worst part, when he finally returned to normal, I felt relieved, grateful, like I had earned my place again. That's how control works when it's done well. It doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like something you have to maintain. The breaking point didn't come from one big moment. It came from accumulation. Small things stacking on top of each other until I couldn't breathe under the weight of them. But if I had to choose the moment I woke up, it would be that dinner party. It was one of Adrian's corporate events. Elegant, polished, predictable, I wore a black dress he had chosen. Simple, classy, not too bold. "Perfect," he said when he saw me. I used to love that word. That night, it felt like a label. Halfway through dinner, the conversation turned to relationships. One of his colleagues joked about how hard marriage was. Adrian smiled. Then he said something that made the entire table laugh. "Marriage is easy," he said casually. "You just need one person who makes decisions and one person who listens." More laughter. Someone asked, "And which one are you?" He didn't hesitate. "I think that's obvious." Then he looked at me. "Serena couldn't survive a week without me." The table laughed again, louder this time. I smiled, because that's what I had trained myself to do, but something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a lock clicking open. Because for the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt clear. I realized something simple and terrifying. He believed that. Not as a joke, not as an exaggeration, as fact. And the worst part, a small part of me believed it too. That night, when we got home, he kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just reduced me to a dependent in front of a room full of people. "You did well tonight," he said, like I had performed, like I had passed. I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes. But something was different. For the first time in years, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. If he disappeared tomorrow, would I know how to live? I didn't like the answer. That was the night everything changed. Not on the outside. On the outside, nothing moved. But inside, a decision had already begun forming. Slow, careful, silent. Because if there was one thing I had learned from Adrian, it was this. Power doesn't come from noise. It comes from control. And for the first time in 7 years, I decided I was going to take mine back. The decision didn't feel powerful at first. It felt fragile. Like holding something small and breakable in my hands, knowing that if I moved too quickly, it would shatter. So I didn't rush. I did what I had learned to do best in that house. I stayed quiet. The next morning, nothing looked different. I made coffee, answered Adrian's questions, listened when he talked about work. I smiled at the right moments. But inside, something had shifted permanently. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. Control leaves patterns. Once you stop defending yourself, you start seeing them clearly. I noticed how he tracked time, how he asked questions in cycles, how he expected consistency in my behavior, tone, schedule, responses. And more importantly, I noticed where his attention wasn't. Adrian didn't monitor everything. He monitored what he believed mattered. Money, social image, my behavior in public, but the spaces in between, he ignored those because he assumed they were empty. That assumption became my first advantage. I started small, always small. Big changes get noticed. Small ones slip through. The first thing I did was open a new email account, not for secrets. For separation, a space that belonged to me and only me. No shared devices, no saved passwords, no traces. It felt strange at first, almost wrong. Like I was breaking a rule that had never been spoken out loud. But that feeling didn't stop me. It confirmed what I already knew. I had been living under rules I never agreed to. Then I started learning again. At night, quietly, Adrian slept early. He liked routine, predictability. By 11 p.m., he was always in bed. By 11:30, he was asleep. That gave me a window. Small, but enough. I began with free online courses. Marketing, branding, digital strategy, the same field I had left, but this time I approached it differently. Not as an employee. As someone building something of her own. At first, it was hard. My mind felt slow, not incapable, just unused, like a muscle that hadn't been exercised in years. I would read the same paragraph twice, sometimes 3 times. Doubt crept in quickly. "You forgot how to do this. You're not as capable as you think." He was right. That voice sounded like me. But it was. It was years of repetition, finally speaking without him in the room. So I made a rule for myself. I didn't need to feel confident. I just needed to continue. 1 lesson a night. That was it, no pressure to master anything. Just consistency. Weeks passed, then months. And slowly something came back, not just skill, clarity. I started remembering who I used to be. Before everything became about keeping the peace, before I measured my words, before I second-guessed my instincts. But rebuilding your mind is only part of reclaiming your life. The other part. Resources. Money had always been Adrian's strongest form of control, so I approached it carefully. I didn't take large amounts. That would have been obvious. Instead, I did something simpler. I created space. When I grocery shopped, I rounded down. When I spent, I saved small differences. Cashbacks, discounts, minor adjustments, nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just consistent. A few dollars at a time, then a little more, then a little more. It wasn't about the amount. It was about the shift. For the first time in years, I had something that didn't come from him. I opened a separate account, slowly built it, quietly protected it. Every dollar felt like proof, not of independence yet, but of possibility. Around that time, I took my first freelance project. It came through a small online platform. A local bakery needed help redesigning their brand. Simple work, low pay. But when I read the message, my hands shook, not because it was difficult. Because it was mine, I almost didn't accept it. Fear moved fast. What if I fail? What if I can't deliver? What if this proves he was right? But then another thought followed. What if I succeed and no one takes that away from me? So I accepted. I worked on that project like it mattered more than anything. Because it did. Late nights. Careful drafts. Revisions I didn't rush. I wasn't just designing a logo. I was rebuilding trust in myself. When the client approved the final design, they sent a simple message. "This is exactly what I needed. Thank you." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Because no one had said something like that to me in years. Not without conditions, not without critique attached, just appreciation. I didn't celebrate out loud. I didn't tell Adrian. I didn't change my routine, but inside, something became steady. That one project led to another, then another, nothing big, nothing impressive yet, but consistent, growing, real. And still, Adrian noticed nothing, because I never challenged him directly. I never argued more, never became different in a way he could name. That was the key. I wasn't escaping loudly. I was repositioning quietly. Months later, something unexpected happened. Adrian started depending on me more, not emotionally, logistically. He asked me to organize small things, review documents, manage schedules. At first, it felt like the same old dynamic, control disguised as trust. But this time, I saw the opportunity. I paid attention to numbers, contracts, structures. The way his business operated, the way money moved, the way decisions were documented, not to interfere, to understand. Because power isn't just about leaving. It's about knowing what you're leaving behind. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that knowledge. I was building something he couldn't see. Skills, savings, strategy, piece by piece. Until one day, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't preparing to survive without him anymore. I was preparing to walk away on my terms. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't be reactive. It would be precise. By the time Adrian realized something was different, it was already too late. The change didn't happen overnight. That's why he missed it. Control teaches you to watch for rebellion, raised voices, emotional reactions, sudden defiance. But it doesn't prepare you for stillness. For someone who stops reacting and starts deciding. Months had passed since the dinner party, months of quiet rebuilding. My skills had sharpened. My savings had grown. My thinking had changed. But externally, I was still Serena. Calm, polite, predictable, exactly who he expected me to be. That illusion was intentional. Because the truth is, you can't take power back from someone like Adrian by confronting them early. You take it by removing their certainty. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Tuesday. He was reviewing a contract at the dining table. Numbers, clauses, deadlines, the kind of work he never trusted anyone else with. "Look at this," he said, sliding the paper toward me. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what happened next. I read it carefully, not pretending, actually understanding it. There's a liability gap here, I said calmly. If the timeline shifts, this clause doesn't protect you. Silence. Not the kind he used to control me. A different kind. Surprised. He looked at me longer than usual, then took the paper back. Read the section again. You're overthinking it, he said automatically, but his tone wasn't as certain. I don't think I am, I replied. No emotion, no challenge, just clarity. That was new. And he felt it. He didn't argue further, but something had shifted. A small disruption in the version of me he relied on. After that, he started watching me more closely, not openly, subtly. Questions came back, but different now. What did you do today? Who did you talk to? Why were you on your laptop so late? Before, those questions would have made me anxious, defensive, careful. Now I answered simply, without over-explaining, without shrinking. I was working. Just some projects. Learning new things. That word, working, lingered in the air. He didn't like it. Because it implied something he didn't control. What kind of projects? He asked one evening. Design, I said. For who? Clients. That was the moment he looked at me fully, not dismissively. Not casually, directly. You didn't tell me you were working again. There it was, not concern, not curiosity, ownership. I didn't think I needed to, I replied. The room went quiet. 7 years of patterns, interrupted in one sentence. He leaned back in his chair, studying me, trying to understand what had changed, trying to locate the version of me he knew. You don't need the money, he said finally. I know. Then why are you doing it? That question used to have complicated answers. Now it had a simple one. Because I want to. Silence again. He wasn't used to answers that didn't revolve around him. He nodded slowly. But I could see it, that small fracture in his certainty. From that day on, things became sharper, not louder. Not explosive, just tighter. He started asserting control in quieter ways, reviewing expenses more carefully, questioning decisions more often, correcting small things that didn't matter. It wasn't about those things. It was about restoring balance, his version of it. But here's what he didn't understand. Balance had already shifted, because while he was reacting, I was preparing. By then, my freelance work had grown, not dramatically, but enough to matter. More importantly, I had structure, separate accounts, documented income, client history, work records, everything clean. Everything traceable, everything mine. That's when I made the next move. I consulted a lawyer, not dramatically, not urgently, quietly. A simple meeting, a conversation, an evaluation. I didn't walk in saying, I want a divorce. I walked in asking, what would I need to leave safely? The answer wasn't emotional. It was detailed. Financial records, asset transparency. Legal positioning, timing mattered most. Don't rush, the lawyer said. Prepare completely, then act once. That sentence stayed with me because it matched everything I had already learned. Power doesn't come from reacting, it comes from readiness. After that meeting, my plan became real. Not just an idea, a structure. I started gathering documents. Carefully. Copies, not originals. Records, not guesses. Everything he assumed I didn't understand, I understood. And still, he didn't know. Until the second crack appeared, it was another dinner. Different people. Same environment. Same version of him. Confident, polished, in control. At some point, someone asked about relationships again. It always comes back to that. Adrian smiled, that familiar smile. The one that used to make me nervous. Serena keeps life simple, he said. She trusts me to handle the important things. A few people nodded, some smiled. Then someone turned to me. And you're okay with that? Before, I would have laughed, deflected, agreed. This time, I paused just long enough. Then I said, I trust myself more now. The table went quiet, not completely. But enough. Adrian didn't react immediately, but I felt it, that shift beside me. When we got home, the silence was different. He didn't speak right away, didn't correct me, didn't dismiss it. He just watched. Finally, he said, You've changed. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied, another pause, longer this time. I don't like it, he said. I believed him. because the version of me he liked didn't exist anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't interested in bringing her back. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror again, I didn't ask if I could survive without him. I already knew the answer. The real question had changed. How much longer do I stay before I leave on my terms? And the answer, not long. By the time I decided to leave, I wasn't angry anymore. And that was the most dangerous part. Anger is loud. Predictable, easy to fight. But calm is precise. Adrian still thought this was a phase, a shift in mood, a temporary independence, something he could correct. He didn't understand that I had already left in every way that mattered. The rest was just paperwork. The final trigger came on a Thursday night. Small, ordinary, almost forgettable. He was late. That wasn't unusual, but when he came home, there was something different about his energy. Tense, irritated. "Why is dinner ready?" he asked, dropping his keys on the counter. I looked up from my laptop. Calm, "I didn't cook tonight." Silence, not shock, not confusion, something sharper. "You didn't cook," he repeated. No, that single word landed harder than it should have, because it broke a pattern he relied on. "Why?" he asked. "Because I was working." There it was again, that word. The one he couldn't control. He stepped closer, slowly. "You're choosing this over your responsibilities now?" Before, that question would have pulled me into explanation. Defense, apology, now. It did nothing. "I'm choosing my work," I said. His jaw tightened. "This house runs because I provide," he said. "You don't just decide to change the rules." And there it was, not partnership. Not marriage, ownership. I closed my laptop gently, stood up. "I'm not changing the rules," I said. "I'm stepping out of them." That was the moment everything broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. "You're being influenced," he said quickly. "Someone's putting ideas in your head." "No," I replied. "I finally started thinking for myself." His voice sharpened. "This isn't you." He was right, it was. The version of me he built was gone. "What do you want, Serena?" he asked, frustration rising now. I held his gaze, steady, clear. "I want my life back." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. "You have a life," he snapped. "I gave it to you." And that was it, the sentence that confirmed everything. "You didn't give it to me," I said quietly. "You controlled it." The air changed, because for the first time I said it out loud. And once truth is spoken, it can't be reshaped into something softer. He stepped back, ran a hand through his hair, trying to recover control. "You're overreacting," he said. "We can fix this." Fix. That word again. "I'm not broken," I replied. Another silence, shorter this time, more dangerous. "Then what are you saying?" he asked. I didn't rush, didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving." There it was. Simple, final. For a moment he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "You're not serious." "I am." His expression changed, from disbelief to calculation. "Where would you even go?" he asked. That question used to scare me. Now it confirmed something important. He still thought I had nothing. "I've already arranged everything," I said. That was the moment he understood, not fully, but enough. "You planned this," he said slowly. "Yes." Silence again. But this time he felt it, the shift, the loss of control. "You've been lying to me," he said. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I stopped telling you everything." That difference mattered. His voice hardened. "You think you can just walk away after everything I've done for you?" There it was. The transaction, everything he gave, was something he believed I owed him for. "I'm not walking away from what you gave," I said. "I'm walking away from what it cost me." That landed, because deep down he knew. But instead of accepting it, he shifted tactics. "You won't last," he said coldly. "You'll come back." Before, that would have shaken me. Now, it didn't reach me at all. "I won't," I said. No anger, no emotion, just certainty. And that unsettled him more than anything else. "Serena," he started, but I raised my hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough. "I'm not asking for permission," I said. "I'm informing you." 7 years of silence, replaced by one boundary. he stopped talking, because for the first time there was nothing left to control. The next morning I left, not in chaos, not in tears, in order. My belongings were already packed, documents secured, accounts separated, legal process initiated, everything prepared. He stood in the doorway as I walked out. Not stopping me, not helping me, just watching, trying to understand how something he thought he owned had slipped out of his hands. I didn't look back, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left behind that belonged to me. And for the first time in 7 years, I stepped into a life that was entirely my own. Not given, not controlled, chosen. Leaving wasn't the hardest part. Staying gone was. The first few days felt unreal. Not painful, not freeing, just unfamiliar. Silence, but not the kind I had lived with before. This silence didn't judge me, didn't wait for me to fix it, didn't demand anything from me. It just existed. And I had to learn how to exist inside it. My new place was small, 1 bedroom. Simple furniture, no glass walls, no polished image. But everything inside it had one thing in common: I had chosen it. The first night I sat on the floor with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. No schedule, no expectations, no one watching. For years, I had imagined this moment as powerful. Instead, it felt quiet, almost fragile, because freedom isn't loud at the beginning, it's unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. The legal process started quickly, not dramatic, not explosive. Structured, Adrian didn't fight immediately. That surprised me. For a while, everything moved through lawyers, documents, requests, evaluations, clean, controlled. But that wasn't his final move. That was him thinking, control doesn't disappear, it adapts. The first attempt came through negotiation. His lawyer proposed a settlement that looked generous: financial support, property division. Stability. On paper, it seemed reasonable, more than reasonable. But I understood something now that I hadn't before. Generosity can be a strategy. Buried inside the terms were conditions. Subtle ones, language that kept threads connected, access, influence, ongoing ties, not ownership, but not freedom either. When my lawyer explained it, I nodded, not surprised. "He's trying to keep leverage," she said. Of course he was. That's how he had always operated. I declined, cleanly, clearly, without negotiation. That's when things shifted. The next message wasn't from his lawyer. It was from him. "Meet me, we need to talk." Old instinct stirred for a moment, the version of me that would have gone, explained, listened. Tried to resolve, but that version didn't exist anymore. "No," I replied. He called. I didn't answer. He texted again. "You owe me that much." That sentence almost made me smile. Because for the first time, it had no power. "I don't owe you access," I replied. No anger, no explanation, just truth. After that, the tone changed. Less controlled, more urgent. "You're making a mistake. You're being influenced. You're throwing everything away." Each message sounded familiar, like echoes from a life I had already left. I didn't argue. I didn't respond. Because not every truth needs to be defended. Eventually, he stopped trying to reach me directly. The courtroom was the last place where control could be contested, so that's where he went. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no emotional speeches, just facts. He arrived the way he always did, composed, confident, impeccable. For a moment, seeing him there almost pulled me backward. Almost. But then I remembered this was no longer his environment. This wasn't a house he controlled, or a room he influenced. This was neutral ground, and neutrality removes advantage. His argument was structured, predictable. He framed himself as the provider, the stable force, the one who had supported the marriage. He didn't raise his voice, didn't attack directly, because control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it presents itself as reason. Then it was my turn. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. Because everything had already been documented. Financial records, communication patterns, timeline of dependency and control, not emotional claims, evidence. That's what made the difference. At one point, he looked at me, really looked. Not with confidence, Not with control, with confusion. Because for the first time, he couldn't predict me. He couldn't guide the outcome. He couldn't reshape the narrative. And in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before: uncertainty. The decision, when it came, was simple: fair division, no ongoing control. No unnecessary ties, clean, final. When we stepped outside the courtroom, he spoke for the first time without strategy. "You've changed," he said. I met his eyes. "Yes," a long pause. "You're not the same person," he added. He was right. "No," I said quietly, "I'm not." Another silence, but this one felt different, not heavy, not tense, just finished. "You'll regret this," he said finally. That used to be his strongest weapon. Now, it felt like something he needed to believe. "I won't," I replied, and I meant it. Because regret comes from losing something valuable, and I hadn't lost anything. I had left something that cost me too much. Months passed, then more. Life didn't become perfect. It became real. Work grew steadily, not overnight success, but honest progress. Each project mattered. Each decision belonged to me. No permission, no approval, no quiet corrections in the background. Just ownership. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a small business event. Nothing huge, just a room full of people building their own paths. At the end, someone asked a question: "What changed everything for you?" I thought about it, really thought. Then I answered. I stopped asking for space and started taking it. Simple, true. Later that night, as I walked back to my apartment, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. Not physically, not emotionally. I wasn't measuring my steps or rehearsing my words. I was just living, and that's when it fully settled. I hadn't just left a person. I had left a version of myself that believed control was love. And in its place, I had built something stronger. Not louder, not perfect, but mine.